there recording? It is recording. We've got lots of people here and there. They must want to hear about Revelations.
Me too.
Are you ready?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
I have injections, pain injections on Wednesday. This time they're doing 4 of them, so hopefully it's going to get better. Last night was the worst it's been in probably a month and a half. So, but by Thursday.
And then you have nerve pain studies coming up. You have a massage coming up. You have lots of good things.
Yep.
He has a massage coming. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You don't give a massage every night?
I use a massage gun, but I am not. I am not. This lady's good.
We have prayer requests.
Yes. Kelly's on. Continue prayers for Kelly, because although I'm not experiencing pain, I know what it's like to live with someone with pain. So Kelly, I've got you in my prayer especially. And Scott, Julie is still not doing well. She's with us today. Continues prayers for Lori Fisher, who is still struggling with aggressive cancer, and Cheryl Thorpe is in San Antonio in a community, Garden Ridge, which is in the Northeast, and she said she was listening to the news this weekend, and those Venezuela gangs that were let out of the prisons in Venezuela and have come to the United States are alive and well in San Antonio, and they've taken over they busted one group of them, but there's more out there that have taken over an apartment complex on Karen Vital, and anybody who knows San Antonio, that's in the northeast section of San Antonio, and not a bad place, you guys. I mean, it wasn't a rough place, but when the Venezuela people take over, it has become a rough place.
We have people in North Carolina. Most of us who live here have some rough idea, but it is so much worse. There is another hurricane bearing down on Florida, and they're expecting it to blow up as it goes across the Gulf. If I were younger and not in pain, I would have headed out with stuff, but keep them in your prayers. Keep up with that. It is a terrible situation, and that kind of ties in with what we're studying. I mean, I think we see more than our share of stuff right now. God, we come to you thankful and amazed that you listen to us. And we see your hand in the world, but there's so much need. These ones we've prayed for, we continue to lift up to you. We ask that your hand be on the storm and the storm response, because we know what people are living with, and we know there are people who believe in you and love you and still feel powerless to go out and be personally involved, but we lift them up in prayer. The study we're about to embark on is difficult. My prayer today is for understanding for those who are listening and participating.
Chastity.
That
Yes, sir.
we're not perfect.
What can I do for you this morning?
I'm sorry about it. It's the front desk downstairs. They got like they might go like $1,000, like over $1,000. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm just trying to get back my
Okay, so I put in the email that I sent out as being part 1 and part 2, but the more we study, I think that the title of this Bible study or this study is The Revelation, and we're going to start with prophecies in the Old Testament that reflect.
I am in church. I'll call you back.
They are absolutely referenced. They're absolutely parallel to what we see in the Revelation, and it is not the book of Revelations, as John Paul pointed out last week. It is the revelation of Jesus Christ as given to John. So I'm going to be calling it the Revelation instead of Revelations.
Okay, and I think one of the points that we really looked at is that this isn't, you know, a lot of people don't study Revelation because they think it's scary, it's something new, but bottom line, this isn't something new.
The things that we see in the Revelation, we've seen very similar things through history. There are people who teach this. If you go to YouTube and search on the book of Revelation, you're going to find that they teach all kinds of crazy stuff. They try to make it as scary as possible. And it's, if you'll read, and in fact, you need to admit, Sherry, the very first sentence or two tells us what it's for, and it's not intended to scare us. If anything, it should be something of a comfort that we know how things come out. The world will go through very difficult times, but if you skip to the end, you see God's in control, God wins, and it's not intended to scare us. And so we're gonna look at it from that aspect. Yeah, can I skip over to one thing real quick? Mm-hmm. A lot of the things that you've probably been taught or heard about Revelation, for a lot of people, are designed to scare you. And I'll mention one thing real quick. There is what's known as the mark of the beast, right? You're all familiar with the mark of the beast. And they say that people will be forced to have the mark on their hand and on their forehead. And there are people who teach, and I mean pastors and, you know, internet teachers, but they teach. They used to tell us they were going to tattoo us, right? You're going to get a tattoo on your hand and your forehead. And then they said, well, it'll be a barcode. And now they're saying you're going to get a chip on your hand and your forehead, right? Let me read you something. This is from Deuteronomy. And I talked a lot about something called the Shema, right? When Jesus was asked, what's the greatest commandment? And the guy says, well, you know, what do you think? And he says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your might. Okay? You're familiar with that? Shema Yisrael, I don't know. Okay. They were instructed to teach that to their children. God, through the prophet, says you want to be diligent about teaching your children. You want to recite this when you wake up in the morning, when you go to bed at night, when you travel along the road. But I want to read you something. This part of it, he said that I've given you these words for you to carry with you. The words I'm commanding you today are to be upon your hearts, and you shall teach them diligently to your children. You know all that. And he says, tie them as reminders on your hands and bind them to your foreheads. The idea behind that is this: love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul and all your might. He's telling them you need to keep this in front of you all the time. Your devotion to Yahweh needs to be, you need to remind yourself of it every single day. Tie them to your hand as a reminder and on your forehead. Does that sound familiar? When it comes down to this last day time, what's going to happen is there's going to be this tremendous effort to pull people away from their faiths, to separate them from God. And the idea behind the mark is it's going to be to demand people's loyalty, to demand their devotion to this worldly government instead of the Yahweh. Does it mirror what they're told in Deuteronomy? Yes, and it's supposed to. This is a government. This is a world government that's going to say, we're taking the place of Yahweh. We want your total loyalty and devotion. And so you aren't going to need those words before you all the time. You're going to do that for us. This is man making himself God. And there are a lot of things that get taught about Revelation that are just bizarre. But if you go, as I said, you go to YouTube and you do a search and you see these crazy things, they get millions of hits, millions. I couldn't get 200. But if I came up with a crazy picture and taught something really, really weird, I could get millions of people to watch. I don't know why we're attracted to that, but we are. And what you're going to see through this is the things that happen in this book are things that have happened before. They're not new and weird. They're more same old. It may be more intense than what we've seen. We're told it's going to be more intense. But the basic principle is man trying to pull people away from God. Now, there is the influence of Satan, and we can't get around it. We can't deny that. We don't like to talk about it. And I don't know, Lisa reminded me of it a couple of weeks ago. It's there, it's real, and we're going to talk about that. People have been labeled as kooks if they talk about a real Satan, but that is also the impetus, that's the driving force behind what goes on here. But instead of, hey, let's study all the crazy stuff, part of what I want you to see is how much like things that we've already seen this is. It's just a lot of similar things have happened. It's just that this will be the last time it ever happens. You know, this is the last one. So let's move on. Mary's got stuff, but this is not going to be about, hey, let's go look into all of the weird things. It may not be what you think.
We came up with some sort of ground rules, and that's probably a harsh way of saying it, but some sort of reminders. And we're going to ask you to be willing to unlearn some of the stuff you might have already think you know. 1, 2, stay with what the word says and not what the internet says. And 3, and which is sort of related, is don't be distracted.
Don't be distracted. Mary and I talked about that a lot this week. We have a place, we have a job to do. We have different jobs to do as we learned about the gifts. I have seen people, lots of people personally, get so wrapped up in Revelation that they neglect everything else. And it's not intended for that. If anything, it's intended to give us relief from that. And so what I don't want to do for us is to get lost in things and lose sight of the fact that we have work to do. We have a place in this. So, you know, whether it's ground rules or not, that's going to be sort of the focus, is not to let ourselves get lost.
So before we get to the book of Revelation, we're going to go back to Daniel, and we will also intersperse some other Old Testament scriptures, but mainly the book of Daniel. And we studied the book of Daniel, and like I said, every time you study it from maybe a different perspective. We're going to start from looking at chapters 9 through 12. Just a couple of reminders. The book of Daniel has 12 chapters, and the first 8 are basically about the times that Daniel, about what was going on there. And chapters 9 through 12 are visions about the future. So we're going to look at 9 through 12. To remind you about Daniel, Daniel was someone in the royal lineage. I mean, he was somebody important. We don't know how important.
Babylon took Jews captive, hauled them up to Babylon. And he specifically says, I want their best and brightest. I want the rich, the intelligent, the popular, and he brought some of them in, and the ones who were the most intelligent, the most well-spoken, he took them and set them apart, fed them, with royal food, and had them study for 3 years with his, his, how do you call them? The soothsayers, his advisors, and they were then to become part of his group of these advisors. Daniel is one of them. Daniel specifically says, I'm not going to take your royal food. I'm not going to let you corrupt me. I'm going to stay true to Yahweh. And so he talks the head eunuch into feeding them other food. And it sounds like no meat, sounds like roots and vegetables and things like that. But Daniel retains his faith in Yahweh. And the idea of what was being done was to pull them away from Yahweh. The emperor wants total loyalty. He basically wants people to worship him. And so he pulls them in and trains them. And the idea, and a lot of them did, after a while, they lose their knowledge or their interest in Yahweh. They're only studying things about Babylon. So Daniel is one of the holdouts. That's a theme that gets repeated over and over through history, is governments and powerful people want to be worshiped. They want your total devotion. So that's what's going on here.
So when Daniel got carried off to Babylon, he was probably 16, 17 years old. We're going to start in Daniel 9, verse 20. At this time, he's about 50 years old. Okay, so he has lived in Babylon for 30 years. And then when we're going to go to chapter 10, we're going to see he's closer to 90 years old. And I'm always intrigued. We lose time when we read the Bible, and else we see the little sentence. And the reason I know he's 50 is it says in the first line of chapter 9, in the first year of Darius, son of Xerxes, a Mede by descent. And that's how chapter 9 starts. So that timing would make Daniel around 50 years old. Okay, so chapter 9 in Daniel, verse 20. While I was speaking, praying, confessing my sins and that of my people Israel, and presenting my petition before the Lord, my God, concerning this holy mountain, while I was still praying, Gabriel, the man I had seen in the earlier vision, came to me in swift flight about the time of the evening sacrifice. He instructed me and spoke with me, saying, "O Daniel, I have come now to give you insight and understanding. At the beginning of your petitions, an answer went out, and I have come to tell you, for you are highly precious. So consider the message and understand the vision."
I think it speaks for itself that Daniel, you notice though that Daniel is taking time to go someplace and pray. We just did a study on prayer, and he's gone out away from things, and he's confessing his own sin and the sins of his nation. He prays for his nation. It's a thing that I find difficult. That's what Daniel's doing, and he receives an answer more direct than most of us get.
And Gabriel, who's Gabriel?
Gabriel is one of the archangels, one of the most powerful of these beings. We know very little about it, but we do know there are some that are extremely powerful, and he's one of that small group.
Verse 24. 70 weeks are decreed for your people and your holy city to stop their transgression, to put an end to sin, to make atonement for iniquity, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal up vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy place.
So 70 weeks. These are weeks of years. So this is a week of years is 7 years. 70 of them is 490 years. What Daniel's being given is a vision of the coming of the Messiah. And if you go through the math on this, and people do, they just, I mean, they spend,
oh my gosh, we listen to a lot of them,
crazy amounts of time. The Jewish calendar is lunar. The Gregorian calendar is based on the, you know, what we use. But when you reconcile them, this is very much a prediction, an assurance that Messiah is coming. But I want to call your attention to what he says. You want to read the first line. About 70 weeks are given.
70 weeks are decreed for your people and your holy city to stop their transgression, put an end to sin, to make atonement for iniquity, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal up vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy place. All one sentence.
The prophets come most of the time telling Israel to repent and to turn back to God, turn back to Yahweh. You've lost your way. You've become wicked. You've neglected. You've gone after other gods that are not really gods. Turn back. And this 70 weeks, this close to 500 years, is a time for them to repent, to turn back to God. And that opportunity is given over and over. And we're going to see that same opportunity in Revelation, that it is what should happen is it should open people's eyes and for them to turn back. Sometimes they listen, sometimes they don't. When they don't listen, things go badly for them. When they do, they're rewarded. That's a thing that is repeated over and over and over again through the Old Testament. So 70 weeks are appointed for your people to get right with God. That's a short way of saying it. And this is all about preparing for the coming of Messiah. And when Mary reads the rest of these weeks, you'll see.
Verse 25. No one understand this. From the issuance of the decree to restore and rebuild Jerusalem until the Messiah, the Prince, there will be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. It will be rebuilt with streets and a trench, but in times of distress. Then after the 62 weeks, the Messiah will be cut off and will have nothing. Then the people of the Prince, who is to come, will destroy the city and the sanctuary. The end will come like a flood, and until the end, there will be war, desolation have been decreed, and he will confirm a covenant with many for 1 week. But in the middle of the week, he will put an end to the sacrifice and offering. And on the wing of the temple will come the abomination that causes desolation until the decree destruction is poured out upon him.
So now the next thing that you need to understand about this, theologians talk about the law of dual reference. I don't like the term, but often prophecy seems to point to things, that are in their near future, but also second things that are far in the future. I don't think of it as dual reference. I don't think it's a prophecy. I think that the things that happen way back then are foreshadowings, though. I think we see parallels that are beyond uncanny. They're amazing. And so you're going to see in here, in this prophecy, things that will happen at the leading up to the coming of the Messiah, but they're going to look uncannily like things that we see in Revelation that happen before the return of the Messiah, before he comes back. And it is no accident. And sometimes it's difficult it seems to switch back and forth. I believe that prophets, when they're speaking this way, when they're talking about the future, time sort of gets lost. they talk about things that will happen in the future as if they've already happened. They have such surety of what's been revealed to them that they often talk about something as if it's already happened. Now, do you want to talk about?
Well, let's go back. So it says there will be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. So there's 7 weeks until the temple's redone. Then after 62 weeks, I'm on verse 26, the Messiah will be cut off and will have nothing.
Will have nothing is one of the translations in Berean. I like the Berean. That's not a good translation. If you go back to the original Hebrew, it's very, very clear. It says the Messiah will be cut off, and that indicates death, but not for himself. That's what that part about, and will have nothing. It is absolutely the Hebrew words. He will die, but not for himself. He'll be cut off, not for himself. This is a prediction of Messiah. We're going to see some more parallels as Mary goes through it to what happens in Revelation.
Then it goes on, then the people of the prince who is to come, and the prince, you will notice in your Bible, is not capitalized. That prince is thought to be the Antichrist, correct? Then the people of the prince who is to come will destroy the city and the sanctuary. The end will come like a flood. Until the end, there will be war, desolation that has been decreed, and he will confirm a covenant with the many for 1 week.
So we're going to get to in Revelation this section about the Antichrist. He's given 7 years. And for the first half of his time, he makes covenants, he makes treaties through flattery. In other words, he's such a nice guy and he's so compelling that he wins people over. It's not till near the middle that he sort of turns.
And it says that, but in the middle of the week, so this 7 years, if you guys haven't studied Revelations, or I'm sure everybody has heard 7 years of tribulation. So this is the 7 years of tribulation. The Antichrist comes, he will confirm a covenant with many for 1 week. But in the middle of the week, he will put an end to sacrifice and offering.
So during what's known as the intertestamental period, between the Old and New Testaments, right? The area that we know as Israel is controlled by Greeks. They are the descendants of Alexander's generals, Alexander the Great. And Israel's sort of in between two of them. But what's important is there's a guy who comes along that is their leader for a time, and all of a sudden I'm blank on the name.
Antiochus.
Antiochus. And he comes into Jerusalem and takes over the temple. And he pulls all of their, religious things out of the temple and sets up a temple to Zeus, right? In the Jewish temple. He defiles the Jewish temple. Not only that, but on the altar, he sacrifices pigs. You know how detestable that is. And he requires Jews to eat the pig that has been sacrificed on their altar. And this is designed to pull them away from Yahweh, to make it, he thinks, impossible. And there are Jews who go along with it. They go along to get along, and they're okay. All the ones who refuse to are killed. They have all of their land taken away, things like that. And so this looks strikingly like the Antichrist. And this guy is sort of a foreshadowing of the Antichrist. And when you hear the abomination that causes desolation, it is the profaning of the temple. And so you read the abomination of desolation in Revelation, it is the same thing as this. It's the defilement of the temple and the trying to cut the Jews off from Yahweh, and to force some of them, a lot of them, to make the choice of abandoning their faith so that they don't wind up being punished. It's impossible, as you read this in Daniel, to really separate the time of and why am I having a blank? Because I'm on medication.
There you go.
Of Antiochus and the eventual Antichrist. You almost can't separate the two. You can't tell.
But the reason you know that it happens twice, it's going to happen twice, that there was a person named Antiochus that happened in that 400 years between when Micah was written, which is the last book of the Old Testament, and the New Testament. That 400 years is called what?
Intertestamental.
Intertestamental. During that 400 years, about halfway through, Antiochus ruled. And Antiochus did a lot of these things that is talked about in this prophecy. But Jesus says that it's going to happen again. And I'm going to read that in a second. I'm going to finish this section. Yes.
Your mic on?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so the information you're providing, you find where?
There are some really good histories, and Jewish histories as well as Greek histories. Some of the stuff comes up in the book of Maccabees that was written during that time. Eventually, some Jews rise up. Their leader is named Judah Maccabee, and him and his sons actually run the Greeks out. So we have some extremely good histories of what went on.
So this intertestamental period is from
when
the
Micah
time
was
that
written.
Malachi, the last book of the Old Testament, is written,
right,
until Matthew, the first book of the New Testament, is written.
That's correct.
And there's 400 years in between.
Approximately.
That's right.
Okay. And then another quick question, since you made the comment, Mary, about Prince is in 26 is lower capital,
right,
lowercase. So yes, we know that in the Bible, when he, if it's he, it's just somebody else. If it's capital H, we know who he is.
right.
But tell me who the prince in 25 is. In 25, not 26.
25. Oh, that. I'm sorry. Wait a minute. Let me. I've got too many pages open. The prince in 25.
Verse 25.
That's the Messiah. So it says.
But it's also lower capital.
Oh, not in mine.
Mine is capital.
ESB. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
It is.
It should be capitalized.
Whether it's capitalized, it should be, but it says the Messiah, comma,
the prince.
the prince.
It's like saying
The Berean?
Scott, my husband.
Okay.
So it's Messiah, the prince. So that is Jesus.
Yeah.
The anointed prince, which would be Jesus.
And as I say, periodically, the word Messiah literally means anointed one. So those are confirmations. I don't know why it's not capitalized, Mario.
Yeah, no, it's okay. It's just the ESV version, but in mine it says the anointed prince also. So that's okay.
We're going to look, though, this idea of princes, we're going to look at that coming up in the next chapter.
So going on, and I'll get to how Jesus tells you it's going to happen more than once, but anyhow, but in the middle of the week, he will put an end to sacrifice. So he's going to, this Antichrist is going to prohibit people from sacrificing in the temple. And on the wing of the temple will come the abomination that causes desolation until the decree destruction is poured out upon him.
So the point in all this is when things begin to happen, when what we know as the tribulation, the revelation, when those things happen, the parallels to things that have already happened are almost perfect as the same. This Antiochus came in, he collected all the copies of Torah he could find and had them destroyed. And then he goes to the temple and he makes it so that they can't bring their sacrifices anymore. He cuts off worship. In the Revelation, we're going to see this one we know as the Antichrist doing exactly the same thing. And it's designed for us to say, oh, we know what this is. We've seen it before.
And another, well, I won't go there. Now we're going to start on chapter 10. Chapter 10, it starts with in the 3rd year of Cyrus, king of Persia. So we know that Daniel was about 90 years old. And at this time, this is after Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar finally decided, was it Nebuchadnezzar that decided they could go back to, he told the Jews that they could go back to Jerusalem, and some did and some didn't. And Daniel was one of the ones that didn't. And some people ask, well, if Daniel was this big follower of Yahweh, why didn't he go back? I mean, I think at this point he believed his calling.
He had a place there.
He had a place there. And now he's an old man. He is 90 years old. Okay. He has had, you know, he's fought fire. He's done lots of things. But here he is, 90 years old. In the 3rd year of Cyrus, king of Persia, a message was revealed to Daniel, who was called Belshazzar. The message was true, and it concerned a great conflict. And the understanding of the message was given to him in a vision. Was there anything there?
No, not really. I mean, Daniel has had that vision a long time ago of the statue, the kingdoms, the head of gold, the chest of bronze, I should remember these, and finally down to the legs of iron with feet of clay. And these are real earthly kingdoms. It starts out with Babylon, and Babylon was so big and so powerful, people thought they will live forever. And suddenly they're just defeated, like unbelievably quickly defeated. And then right behind that, we have, the Medes and Persians. Persia is Iran. And so they're all closely related. They're all Persians. And they were so powerful, they couldn't possibly be defeated. And as per the prophecy, all of a sudden, boom, they're defeated. And then it comes behind the Persians, Greece. And that's Alexander the Great. And Alexander rolls up the known world. He is unstoppable. He controls more land, I believe, than anyone through history. And people think, well, nobody can stand up to Alexander. And Alexander croaks. He dies at like 32 years of age. No heirs, no dynasty, no nothing. It just ends. And
Daniel prophesied all of these things very accurately. So some of these things have happened. There's already at Cyrus, but Alexander is before Alexander, right?
Yeah, so we can go ahead with that.
Okay, in those days, I, Daniel, was mourning for 3 full weeks. I ate no rich food, no meat or wine entered my mouth, and I did not anoint myself with oil until the 3 weeks were completed.
So Daniel, he says he was mourning. He doesn't tell us what he's mourning about. I believe it's likely that it was for his people, for the state of Israel. And one thing they do in the Middle East is they mourn. I mean, we've lost that. But he's gone out and he's in prayer, and it's sort of a fast. He's not eating rich food, but he's there to pray and to mourn for his people. And I'm just going to say that's my opinion. We're going to treat it as fact for now. So he's concerned about Israel, about the people of Israel, and he's praying to God, and he doesn't get an answer right away. You want to go ahead?
Yes, chapter 10, verse 4. On the 24th day of the 1st month, as I was standing on the bank of the great river, the Tigris, I lifted up my eyes, and behold, there was a certain man dressed in linen, with a belt of fine gold from Ophos around his waist. His body was like myrrh, and his face like the brilliance of lightning. His eyes like flaming torches, his arms and legs like the gleam of polishing bronze, and his voice like the sound of a multitude. Only I, Daniel, saw the vision. The men with me did not see it, but a great terror fell upon them, and they ran and hid themselves.
So Daniel is seeing this angel. It's a being, but I think we can safely say probably one of these small group of archangels. And he sees other people do not. And they know something's up. A terror takes them, and they all scatter. They leave him. He's there. He's 9 years old, and he sees this vision, this being in front of him, and we're going to see that he's very much afraid.
And like you said, this is not the only time this happens. Same thing with Paul on the way to Damascus.
It is at the beginning of the Revelation. We're going to also see a vision of Jesus with this, countenance like lightning, this brightness. They're seeing with something other than human eyes. Now, that's the best description I can get. There are things, I always tell you, there's more to this place than meets the eye. What comes next is what's important.
Verse 9. So I was left alone, gazing at this great vision. No strength remained in me. My face grew deathly pale, and I was powerless. I heard the sound of his words, and as I listened, I fell into a deep sleep with my face on the ground. Suddenly a hand touched me and set me trembling on my hands and knees. He said to me, Daniel, you are a man who is highly precious. Consider carefully the words that I'm about to say to you. Stand up, for I have now been sent to you. And when he had said this to me, I stood up trembling. Do not be afraid, Daniel, he said. For from the first day that you purposed to understand and to humble yourself before God, and your words were heard, and I have come to respond to them, in response to them. However,
let's stop there.
Okay.
I want to make a point about this. How often do we see an angel show up, and what is the thing they always say? Fear not.
do not be afraid.
Don't be afraid. I'm very convinced, I'm passionate about the idea that we are not supposed to live in fear. And we're given that assurance over and over again. It is no different in Revelation. It is not there to make us afraid. If someone is teaching you Revelation in a way that makes you afraid, something is wrong, right? You're being misled. They've missed the point. But he sees this vision, and even Daniel, who's seen visions like this before, or angels like this before, falls down in abject fear. And the angel says, don't be afraid. You're a man who's highly precious. I didn't come here to harm you, right? This is a message from God, but I didn't come here to harm you. Stand up, be strong, be reassured. And the next part, we finally get to the meat of this, something we're going to need to talk about.
This must be Gabriel, because he's the messenger archangel.
Well,
Yes, we assume it is. Yeah.
you can assume that. The fact that it doesn't say it, I can say we guess that it is. But yeah, but he's seen Gabriel before, and in this case, this being appears different than before. We don't really know, but I think it's safe to say this is one of the very powerful angels, because what comes next?
So remember, he said, I heard you praying and mourning your people, and I was on my way. That's where he stopped. Verse 13. However, the prince of the kingdom of Persia opposed me for 21 days. Then Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me, for I have been left there with the king of Persia. Now I have come to explain to you what will happen to your people in the latter days, for the vision concerns those days.
So, start at the end. He's come to tell Daniel what's going to happen to his people in the latter days. That's what makes me think that as he's praying and mourning, it is out of concern for his people, because the answer he gets from Gabriel, we assume, is from the angel, is going to be to tell him what will happen with his people in the latter days. He's being given a message about, I think, the thing he's been mourning about. And the message is, it's going to be okay. Your people will still be around. God will still be looking out for them. I'm going to tell you about the future of your people. But here we get to the middle part. And those of you at home here, I'll turn to the camera a little bit. Listen to what he says. He says, Daniel, from the moment you started praying, you were heard. A message was sent out. I was sent to you, but the prince of Persia withstood me for 3 weeks, right? Who could withstand this archangel? I have studied this since I was 8, all right? This has been, I know Mary said the word weird. Yes, it's been a strange life. But I'm convinced that there are areas, not necessarily countries, because those are just lines on a map. Persia, you know how combative, how warlike Persia is? They appear to be, if not ruled over, certainly influenced by a being. If you want to say, some people say demons, some people say fallen angels, but there is more to this place than meets the eye. And this being, this prince of Persia, most certainly is not a human like you and me to withstand an archangel. And clearly, they don't want this message reaching Daniel. And so he winds up being withheld, being withstood by the prince of Persia for 3 weeks. He says, look, I would have been here sooner. I couldn't. This is amazing stuff. And this is going to force us to look at and talk about the idea that there are powers. You know, Paul says, we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers. And there are other ways of translating that, but bottom line, there's more going on here. And we're not just, this is not a contest against other human beings. There are two kingdoms at play, if you will. So this is a revelation of its own about these things going on.
Hey, Scott.
Yes.
But it obviously just makes it all clear. Who's his buddy who helps him overcome this dude?
We're about to read it.
The archangel of war. And
We're about to read it.
Left?
Yep. Then Michael, one of the chief princes, and you know I'm going to skip
hold on, Gene.
Okay. Yeah.
Is your mic on?
I think so. Is
So
there,
what I've been getting, Gene, is a whole bunch of people at home say, we can't hear, and it's not fair to them. So the green light
is there, I don't see the light.
So there's a little
Yeah, I see the light. Is there the light on the mic?
Yeah.
Wish I could see the light. I can't see the light. Is the reading that it's an angel because the king was able to block him for 24 days or whatever the
21
period is. An indication that it was not God himself. Because if it was God himself, he couldn't withstand it. He couldn't stop him. He would go right through. Otherwise, we would have a lesser God, right? So
this is like an evil angel fighting.
But I know what he's saying. What we're getting from this, though, Gene, is that God uses these angels, these beings here in this earthly place. Yeah.
But what I'm trying to show, it's an indication. You little guys, remember, I mean, even the angel got blocked, but hey, he can't stop the man on top. There's one God, and he's supreme.
Eventually, that's what the revelation is about, is in the end, there's a direct involvement here. But current times, these beings are, not in charge, but they are certainly influencing. And I believe
that's how the evil ones can win some battles, but they're not going to win the war. And this was a battle, and the prince of Persia is an evil angel, if you will, and he was fighting, let's call him Gabriel, and there was a standoff, and Michael comes and helps out Gabriel.
Michael comes and takes over for him. He's got a job to do. I've got to go take this message to Daniel. And so Michael comes and takes his place and holds this force off, while then we assume Gabriel comes and delivers his message. This is trippy stuff, boys and girls. I mean, this is a thing that we really, especially if we're going to then move to Revelation, we've got to get comfortable with these facts.
We know, I'm going to just show you on, if you go to verse 21, it says, and we'll go back, but it says, yet no one has the courage to support me against these except Michael, your prince. So this idea that Scott says, this belief that these archangels or these angels have regents, and Michael is considered the angel over the area of Israel.
The area of Israel and the people of Israel as well. He's certainly not in Israel this time. But he says nobody else, whoever this prince of Persia is powerful enough. He says none other had the courage to come and stand against this other than Michael the archangel, who is your prince, Daniel. He's the one that apparently is over Israel. These are things we're not often exposed to.
Verse 15, while he was speaking these words to me, I set my face towards the ground and became speechless. And suddenly, one with the likeness of a man touched my lips, and I opened my mouth and said to the one standing before me, my Lord, because of this vision, I am overcome with anguish, and I have no strength. How can I, your servant, speak with you, my Lord? Now I have no strength, nor is my breath left in me. Again, the one with the likeness of a man touched me and strengthened me. Do not be afraid, you who are highly precious, he said. Peace be with you. Be strong now. Be very strong. As he spoke with me, I was strengthened instead. Speak, my Lord, for you have strengthened me. Do you know why I have come to you? He said. I must return at once to fight against the prince of Persia. And when I have gone forth, behold, the prince of Greece will come. But first I will tell you what is inscribed in the book of truth. Yet no one has the courage to support me against these except Michael, your prince.
Wow. So this is one of those things, the way it's worded, that seems a little confusing, right? He asked Daniel, do you know why I've come?
Then he doesn't answer.
And he doesn't answer. He says, do you know why I've come to you? I'm going to tell you, but you got to understand, I don't have long. I've got to get back to the battle. So he sort of sets the stage. There's not going to be time for a lot of question and answer here. Do you know why I've come? I'm going to go ahead and do you know why I've come to you? He said, I must return at once to fight against the prince of Persia. And when I've gone forth, behold, the prince of Greece will come. The prince of Greece. Now, in Daniel's original vision of, it was Nebuchadnezzar's, but you remember the statue of the different kingdoms? After Persia comes Greece. And the ruler of Persia right now has already started stirring Greece up. He's already, started wanting to go to war with them. And Alexander the Great is ramping up. He's only probably at this time, maybe 19. But the prince of Greece is going to be the next great kingdom in line. It's been prophesied. Greece is going to wipe out the Medes and the Persians. And what it appears to be saying here is that the prince, if these are fallen angels, whatever they are, the prince of Greece is chomping at the bit. He's ready to come down and get involved down here. So he says, I got to go back. He says, I'm going to tell you why I'm here, But I got to get out of here. I got to go back. And as soon as I go, this Prince of Greece is also going to get involved. This is heavy stuff. And the reason why it's so important is, like I told you, that Greece is next in line, and their prince is feeling his oats. He's coming down. There's stuff being spoken to here that's sort of eye-opening. It's 10.
Is this not talking about one and the same thing? We're talking about these humanly kingdoms, but they are all being just puppeteered by Satan.
The princes are, in fact, the representatives, the servants of Satan. Yes, absolutely. And when I tell you that Revelation is not something new and weird, it's something same old. It may be at a larger scale, but we've seen it before. And that's what this is a foreshadowing. I want to read one other thing real quick because it's important. We're talking about prophecy. And the prophet Joel talks about a time, and I'm in Joel, and this is chapter too small for me to read up here. But the prophet Joel is talking about, he has come to Joel and told him Israel needs to turn back. Remember that message? You need to come back to Yahweh. And when you do, things are going to get better, right? And he's talking about a time when his people will not ever be put to shame again, right? Never be put. This is also end time prophecy. But I've got something I want to read you. If you can stick with me just a couple minutes, I want you to hear this. Afterward, after you've turned back to me, I will pour out my spirit on all people, not just the Jews, on all people. Your sons and daughters will prophesy, right? Remember this, we're told women just have no place, and there are people now that have been taught that Christianity, women are not valued. Your sons and daughters will prophesy. And I hope I don't get in trouble for this. Last week, when we were talking about gifts and we were talking about healing, Lisa said something that I know two people needed to hear, one of them being me, about healing with what I'm going through. But I'm telling you that in the early church, where it talks about prophesying, which is bringing a word of knowledge or wisdom from God, you heard that last week. That's what it looks like. And she brought an explanation of something that was very much needed at the time. And she said, I just felt like I had to speak. This prophecy is not always telling the future. Sometimes it is, but sometimes God works through us. That's one of the gifts. And you heard it last week. Your sons and daughters will prophesy. Your old men will dream dreams, and your young men will see visions. Even my manservants and maidservants, I will pour out my spirit in those days. This idea that God's people are the Jews, how many times through these studies have I shown you that he always intended the Jews were the conduit for the Messiah, but he always made provision for the Gentiles, for us, even back then. And he says, I will show wonders in the heavens and on earth, blood and fire and columns of smoke. That's going to sound just like the Revelation. The sun will be turned to darkness. That is one of the 7 bowls that's poured out in the Revelation. This is an end time prophecy. The sun will be turned to darkness, the moon to blood, before the coming of the great and awesome day of the Lord. And everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. You understand that this deal of us going into Revelation, it's talked about all over the place. And it says that it's for all people. Everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. There is nothing in Revelation that should be scary. Unless, of course, you're planning on being on the other side, in which case you should be very worried. Last thing, everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. For on Mount Zion and in Jerusalem, there will be deliverance, as the Lord has promised, among the remnant called by the Lord. And this remnant becomes an issue in the Revelation as well. What we're seeing, and the reason I want to bring that up first, is for you to understand that prophesying is one of the gifts. And it doesn't mean telling the future most of the time. And it is a gift that is given to some of us. You heard it last week in action. All of these things, I'm going to do my best. We're going to do our best to try and begin tying together with the book of the Revelation when we get there.
Scott, what you just read, was that a Bible verse?
It was Joel.
Joel.
And it is...
Joel 2.
I didn't sleep last night, so my eyes are not happy with me, and it's little bitty print. Joel 2.
What did you say?
I started the printout at verse 25 down to the end. But what I really read was starting at 28 down to the end.
Okay. Thank you.
Some of these things seem very alien to us and weird to us, and they shouldn't. The things that we're going to look at in Revelation are not new. And if they're weird, they're really no more weird than this, what I just read you. Your sons and daughters will prophesy, and my people will never be put to shame again. This story has been in motion from the beginning. So if you're going to read ahead in Revelation, the point I want you to get at is there's nothing to be afraid of there. Nothing, not for you. God, we're thankful for this message. We're thankful that you brought a message to Daniel that we can look at and know what to expect. You told him this was so he would be able to know what would happen with his people in the future. And we then know what to expect for us and the people around us. We're grateful for the message. But my prayer today, the thing I would ask for, is that we understand and we begin to take from you the fact that we don't have to live in fear ever. That you watch over us, that you've left others to watch over us. And even though times get hard for us, we don't have to be afraid. Be with us this week as we go out. Help us, encourage us to find the strength and the courage to tell some other people. This gift of not living in fear is such a wonderful thing. Help us to remember to bring that same reassurance to others. Amen.
Yeah. Thank you, guys. Good luck to Ben. They're playing the Rams today.
You know, I am so sick of the NFL forcing us to subscribe to stuff, and I'm about to break down just because I want to see Ben play so badly. So,
we do too.
And
hi, Jerry.
You see Kelly on my screen. She's on the bottom right. She is going through pain that is so much like what I'm experiencing. Don't forget her, please. I know people call and say, let me see if I can do this. People call and check on me. Don't forget Kelly. Kelly is exactly where I'm at, but she's in Canada and she doesn't have a bunch of people around her. Keep her in your prayers, please. And we'll pray for Ben.
Thank y'all. Love y'all. Have a great week.